Bad Wheelie here, and it's late August 2022, and we're heading out on a trip from Custer, South Dakota, all the way to Devil's Tower in Wyoming. We've been staying outside, just outside of Custer, and we're leaving just myself and my son. Last time I was here, I had a road bike. This time, my son and I both brought our GS's. I'm on my GS Adventure 1200. He's on his 800. And we're going to try to stay off-road and stay off-road for the whole trip, counting on forest roads as well as some forest trails. So right now we're driving through Custer. As I mentioned, we're staying just outside of Custer. Custer is a really nice place to stay. It's well located in the Black Hills area, giving you lots of options. Custer is a fairly small town, about 2,000 people. It was founded in 1875, named after George Custer, and it's got an interesting history. I think one of the things most interesting about it is it was really kind of founded at the end of kind of 1875-ish, so to speak. Custer came there in 1874 to explore the gold that was found there on behalf of the U.S. government, and it established itself pretty successfully as a gold town. There was a gold rush there, and a lot of people flooded there in 1875. And then in 1876, they discovered gold near Deadwood, and the entire town practically depopulated.
Well, I don't know what you got.
The town later became popular again in 1890 when the Burlington Railroad came in. But there's a lot of activities there. You have the Custer Wildlife Park with its wildlife loop, which is a lot of fun. You have Needles Highway, which is just an absolutely breathtaking ride. You also have the Mount Rushmore Crazy Horse. You have Iron Mountain Road with its pigtails, the 540-degree turns on wooden trestles. Very, very fun ride to do. All of that's on pavement, but it's worthwhile no matter what bike you're on, honestly.
How's it looking?
So if you look up in the upper right corner of the screen here, you'll see a map of the course we're following. And you can tell from these images, we're on all different kinds of terrain. A lot of these forest roads are not regularly traveled. A lot of grass growing on them, a lot of different terrain, not very technical. A little bit of rock here, some ditches, but nonetheless, a ton of fun. And we're able to keep up at a pretty good clip. We've got a lot of miles to cover. We're going to be heading out for 267 miles. On your screen there in the upper right corner, you'll see at the bottom lower right side is where we're starting. We're following the track that's on the top there, heading up to the far top left corner, and that's where Devil's Tower is. And then we'll be cutting straight down south and then back over and down through a lot of the same area but on different roads, and getting back sometime late this afternoon or early evening, because again we have a lot of road to cover, a lot of trail to cover, and we've got probably about almost 8 hours of riding to do, and we planned on spending some time at Devil's Tower, maybe some other stops along the way. So we did a fair amount of traveling on a variety of different surfaces. Well, some gravel, but again, we tried to stay on the most rustic trails, roads that we could find to get out there. Hence the long time. I've driven past Devil's Tower before, but we've never actually been close to it. So we're really excited to see it today. As you're out on these roads, and we're still in South Dakota, getting closer to Wyoming, you really learn to appreciate that most of this land is open range for wildlife. You also realize that the routing that you might find on your GPS or whatever device you might be using, many of the roads are not used at all. Some of them are on private property. You can't pass through them. And so you do find yourself having to make a few detours from what you might have planned in the beginning. So you need to stay nimble, and you need to have a good navigational tool with you. There's a lot of cattle in these parts. Early on, we didn't see much that interfered with our riding. But as we continued along, we did find that there were a lot of wildlife that would just get, not wildlife, excuse me, domestic cattle that would just get in the road. And, you know, you're not too concerned about them generally, but they are big. And some of them have their horns. So, you know, you wonder, wow, will a bull charge us? They didn't, and I'm guessing they won't. But you do try to at least keep your distance. It seemed to me that they really didn't want anything to do with our motorcycles.
They're cows. Well, we hit the same dead end twice. We came here earlier, I rode up there. You can ride that, but we don't know where it goes. So, we're gonna head back and
So, as I mentioned, you sometimes will get yourself lost. I don't know, honestly, if I take the same risks of getting super close to these animals with buffalo, which we saw quite a few of in the wildlife park. But cattle are clearly a lot more docile and more predictable than wild animals. So again, you can see the terrain is just different throughout. A lot of sandy areas. Able to move at a decent speed. You know, fortunately, we've got fairly aggressive tires on our bike, but we were able to move at a nice clip, which made it a lot more fun. So every time you see one of these cattle starting to run, and they always seem to do the same thing, they kind of get into like a stance where they kind of lower their bodies and then they dart away. It is really beautiful out here, the combination of the different trees. So there, that sign, we just crossed over into Wyoming. Now this road runs along the border, so we kind of meander a little bit back and forth over the border, but that was the primary point that we got noticed, that we were essentially in Wyoming now, and that we might need different permits. This here is still a road, difficult to probably for two trucks to pass each other. But it is still a road, a lot of rock and gravel. So this encounter was really interesting because the cattle really didn't have any place to go. There was a bit of a drop off on the right side, and they didn't want to go down that steep hill. We were cautious not to get too close.
safe or not.
Because you just don't know if you get up close behind one of them defensively, they'll try to kick you or something. So we were careful, but we weren't gonna. They won't get out of the way if you don't start to really ride into them. So that's what we had to do. Normally wouldn't ride alongside an animal like that with the fear that it would run in front of you. But as we got up a little bit farther, we just wanted to get rolling, so we got right up next to them. And again, the young ones especially Probably the least predictable, but still, they stayed away. So this vehicle right now, this truck you see, it's the first vehicle we've seen.
Hi.
And we've been riding for a good couple of hours at least at this point, probably 2.5 hours in. I'm telling you, if you have a chance to do this, it is just an absolutely spectacular ride. The scenery is fantastic. The different geological formations in terms of rock, as well as just the pasture and the trees. It's just super pretty. And the hills are rolling. Nothing too tremendous in terms of going up or down hills. They did a nice job of keeping the road passage pretty level. But it is just absolutely stunning scenery. And we couldn't ask for a better day. It was sunny, a little bit of cloud cover, just real pretty. In Wyoming, one of the things we noticed is that they broadcast via signage that you're in open range area. They do a lot more of letting you know that you're in open range. Ironically, we saw more cattle back in South Dakota, where it wasn't labeled open range, than we saw out in Wyoming. When you cross over into Wyoming, you're about halfway there. So we still had quite a little bit of riding to do before we got to our destination. Along the way, we passed a few sections like this where it looked like there was abandoned stockade camp setups, you know, with structures and things that hadn't been used for a long, long time. But clearly this area is farmed, as evidenced by the large round bales of hay. So this is one area where we got to this farm on the left, an operating farm, ranch, and we realized we'd missed a turn. We went back, looked for the turn, didn't see it, doubled back again, and found a grassy path that we thought, hey, we were supposed to get on that. So we headed down it, and we went on it for quite a few miles. This is it here, and it got pretty nasty. And as I looked at my GPS, I was using a Montana 700 from Garmin, excellent device. As I was looking at the map, I noticed it looked like our road here would dead end, but we stuck with it almost as far as we could go. Then we looked up ahead, and what we saw was essentially a canyon that this road would drop down into. Well, we decided that just seemed like a bad idea. So at some point here, we turn around and pretty much gave up, and then we headed back, and we looked for the shortest path to the main road, and then we found another one that ran through that ranch's, one of that ranch's areas, this here. And as you can see, not a lot of traffic on this. You can barely see the path, but it got us back to that road. And we were able to take that and get out of this area. So it was a good 20-minute excursion. Some fun riding. Got a little bit more technical. That, by the way, would be the second vehicle we saw on the entire trip. This is one of the few sections of paved area, and this takes us right into the town. It will take us into Sundance, which is right on I-90. And Sundance really is kind of an entryway to the Black Hills forest that is on the Wyoming side. So Sundance is a very small town, smaller than Custer. Got a population of just a little over 1,000. I think it's about 3 square miles. And it is considered the gateway to Devil's Tower. It's about 30 miles from here, I think as the crow flies, to Devil's Tower. But of course, we're taking all the back roads, so we're about an hour and a half out. So as we're riding along here, we also see signs for Bear Lodge, and we thought that was a place where people would go to stay. It was a Bear Lodge resort. But it turns out Bear Lodge is the Indian name, or one of the many Indian names for Devil's Tower. And its genesis is rooted in a story about 2 girls trapped, and they're trying to get out of the clutches of a bear, and this structure comes up from the ground, Devil's Tower, Bear Lodge, comes up and rises to protect them from the bear. That's my understanding of the story. So as we travel through the Black Hills, we get to a number of different nice peaks. It does get hilly here, and we get closer and closer, and we finally get to Devil's Tower. And here we'll share with you some of the pictures we took as we did one of the hikes around the tower. There are 2 hikes that you can take around Devil's Tower, and one of the hikes is about 3 miles, and it's a little distant from the tower, and then there's one up close that goes right around the base perimeter. Devil's Tower is said to be, oh gosh, how tall is it? It is about 1,267 feet, but that is from the base of the river down below in the valley. So from the base of the actual structure of rock, I think it's about 867 feet tall. So it's pretty neat. It's really quite impressive. When you get up close, you really appreciate the columnar jointing, the hexagonal looks like pencils that have been stacked together that protrude upward. And interestingly, it's an igneous formation that is surrounded by sedimentary rock. So you got this igneous rock surrounded by sedentary rock. It didn't actually rise up. The sedentary rock around it, sedimentary rock around it, all washed away. And that created the butte that is Devil's Tower. So that river you saw off in the distance in one of the pictures is the Belle Fourche River, and that is kind of considered the base of where the formation starts to move upward. And that's a little bit of a distance from the actual rock and boulder that you see. Interestingly, they have not had a collapse of any of those columns in about 200 years.
Wow.
So as we're heading back now, we came to one of the first interesting signs regarding a road closure. We were advised that it's private property, and there were probably 4 signs that warned us that if we continued, we'd be shot. So my son told me that he's too young to be shot, so we decided to turn around, and at this point, the only option for us was to get on I-90, the interstate. Fortunately, we only had to do that for a handful of miles, and then we were able to get off and get back onto dirt roads. As we rode down the highway here, we debated quite a bit whether or not we should have just went on and pleaded ignorance if somebody found us. But we took seriously the warning, so we turned around. Anyways, you can see here now we're well into our ride back, and we're following a little bit of a different path than the road we took out. We're back in South Dakota now, and our path crossed the other path on the way out a couple of times, but by and large we stayed on fresh roads that we hadn't traveled on before. And as I mentioned, we ended up on the road, actual riding time, not including our hiking time, of 7 hours and about 45 minutes. So we left at shortly after the sun rose in the morning. But even with that, we still didn't manage to get back before dark. So by the time we pulled into Custer, the sun had set. It was a beautiful evening. We thought about a lot of the things we'd want to do since this was near the end of our trip, a lot of the things we'd want to do on another trip. I think the next time I come out here, I'm going to bring my UTV, and there are just tons of places to ride on a UTV, but I definitely want to come back. Well, that's our ride from Custer to Devil's Tower and back again. I hope you had fun. I hope you get a chance to watch some of the other videos that we've put up on our channel. And that's the end of this one. Bad Wheelie out.